The fork clinked against my plate before I even realized I'd dropped it. My father was standing, napkin still tucked into his collar, wine glass raised like he was about to toast the president. The whole table, aunts, uncles, my grandmother with her hearing aid turned up too loud, my brother's girlfriend who'd only met us twice, all of them looking at him with those warm, expectant birthday smiles. "Since we're all here," he said, "I want to make something official." I remember thinking it was going to be about the house. Or maybe a retirement announcement, something normal. "Claire is going to co-sign for your brother's car. We talked about it, and it's the right thing to do. Family takes care of family." He sat back down like he'd just announced dessert. I didn't speak. I couldn't. Not because I was scared, but because something in my chest just went very, very still. Like that moment right before a storm when the birds stop. My mother reached over and patted my hand. "It's just paperwork, sweetheart." 34 people at that table, every single one of them nodding. "My name is Claire Weston. I'm 32 years old. I'm a senior accountant at a firm that handles municipal contracts. I know exactly what co-signing means. I have known since I was 19 years old, and my financial literacy professor spent an entire lecture on it. Co-signing is not paperwork. Co-signing is liability. Co-signing means if my brother, Derek, stops paying, and Derek has stopped paying on everything he has ever owed in his entire adult life, the debt becomes mine. The missed payments show up on my credit. The collections calls come to me. The legal judgment lands on my name. I know this. My father knows I know this. He announced it anyway, in front of 34 people, on his 60th birthday. So that saying no would mean ruining the party. I picked my fork back up. Cut a piece of chicken. Chewed slowly. My brother was across the table, eyes on his plate, doing that thing he does where he pretends not to be aware of a situation he orchestrated entirely. I smiled at my grandmother when she caught my eye. I refilled my mother's water glass. I waited, because I had learned in 32 years that the moments that change everything are not the ones where you react. They are the ones where you get quiet and start paying attention. Let me explain who Derek is, because the story doesn't make sense without it. Derek is 28. He is charming in a way that takes about 40 minutes to see through, which is long enough for most people to already like him. He has a laugh that fills a room. He remembers your coffee order and your dog's name and the thing you mentioned one time about wanting to visit Portugal someday. He is genuinely fun to be around. He is also someone who has never, not once, not for a single sustained period, been held responsible for the consequences of his own choices. He dropped out of college his junior year, not because of a crisis, not because of mental health, not because of money, not because he had some brilliant opportunity pulling him away. He dropped out because he said the major wasn't right for him anymore, and my parents told him that was completely fine, that he should follow his instincts, and then quietly paid the remaining tuition balance he owed the university so it wouldn't affect his transcript. He started a landscaping business. My parents bought the equipment. The business lasted one season. He said the margins weren't there. He moved to Austin for a girl. She ended my parents for the moving truck. He came back 8 months later. My parents paid the deposit on his new apartment here. The car before this one, a used Honda he'd bought himself, one of the few things he'd actually done on his own. He stopped making payments on after month 4. The lender repossessed it. His credit score, last I heard through my mother, was somewhere that made mortgage brokers laugh. Every single time there was a reason. Stress, bad timing. He just needed a little help to get back on his feet. And every single time my parents provided it and told him and themselves that this was the last time. I was never directly asked to contribute to Derek's life. Not until 3 years ago, when my mother called me on a Tuesday afternoon and said very casually that Derek was in a small legal situation, nothing serious, and that my parents were a little stretched at the moment, and would I be able to help just this once. I wired $2,000 that same evening. After that, the requests came every few months. They were always framed the same way. Just this once. Just until he gets stable. You know how he is? He just needs more time than other people. And I said yes, every time, because I told myself it was love. Because I told myself that's what family does. Because saying no felt like abandoning someone who was struggling, even when, underneath that, I knew perfectly well that he wasn't struggling. He was coasting. On all of us. Mostly on me, because my parents were retired on a fixed income, and I made good money. I had built that deliberately. Student loans paid off at 26. Emergency fund fully stocked. Retirement contributions maxed since my first real job. No debt. No financial drama. I had worked for that stability the way some people work for a view, methodically, patiently, one careful decision at a time, because I had seen what financial instability looked like up close, and I had decided early that it would not be my life. My parents had watched me build all of it, and somehow, somewhere along the way, my stability had become a resource they felt entitled to allocate. I found that out fully, clearly, on my father's 60th birthday, at his favorite restaurant, in front of the whole family. That night, driving home, I did not cry. I turned the radio off and I drove in complete silence, and I thought about co-signing documents. I thought about the specific legal language. Joint and several liability. I thought about my credit score, which I had spent over a decade building, which currently sat at 811. I thought about what a single series of missed payments would do to it. I thought about the mortgage I was planning to apply for in the spring, the one I had been saving toward for 4 years. Then I thought about something else. My brother had asked me 6 months earlier to co-sign for this same car. He called me directly, casual, like he was asking to borrow a phone charger. I'd said I needed to think about it. I never called him back. I thought that was the end of it. He had gone to my father instead, and my father had turned it into a public announcement at a family dinner so that I would have no clean way to refuse. That was not an accident. That was a strategy. I pulled into my parking garage and sat in the car for a long time. Not because I was deciding. I had already decided. I think I had decided the moment the fork hit the plate. I was sitting there because I wanted to be very certain that what I was about to do came from clarity, not from anger, because those two things produce very different outcomes. Anger makes you loud and reactive and easy to dismiss. Clarity makes you quiet and precise and impossible to argue with. By the time I got upstairs, I was very clear. I did not respond to any of the texts that came in that night. There were several. My mother asking if I was okay. My aunt saying it was so generous of me. My brother just, "Thanks, sis," means a lot. My father, nothing, he never texts, he just expects. I let them all sit. The next morning, I called my lawyer. I want to be clear that I have a lawyer not because I am litigious or dramatic, but because I am an accountant who handles contracts for a living, and I understood early that having a real estate attorney you trust is just adult infrastructure. Like having a good mechanic or a doctor who actually listens. I called her and I explained the situation and I asked her to walk me through every option I had. She did. It took about 40 minutes. By the end, I had a plan. Then I called my bank. Then I pulled out my laptop and opened a folder I had started keeping 3 years ago when the first wire transfer went out. Every payment, every date, every amount, every text message where my mother had explained the situation and asked for help. I had kept them all, not out of resentment, just because I am someone who keeps records. It's what I do. I work with numbers. Numbers don't lie, and they don't misremember, and they don't revise history to make themselves look better. The folder had a total at the bottom, $31,400, over 3 years, to cover Derek's rent gaps, his legal situation, 2 months of car insurance when he said he couldn't swing it, the deposit on the Austin apartment that he never paid back, and several smaller things I had almost forgotten about, $31,000, and not 1 cent repaid. My mother showed up at my apartment 2 days later. She didn't call first. She never calls first when she's coming to manage me, because she knows if she calls I'll have time to prepare, and she'd rather catch me off guard. She knocked on my door at 10 in the morning on a Thursday, which meant she knew I work from home on Thursdays. I let her in, made coffee, sat down across from her and waited. She did the sigh first, the one that means she is burdened and disappointed but still trying to be patient with me. Then she said, "I don't understand why you're making this so hard." I asked her what, specifically, she thought I was making hard. Derek needs the car for work. He has a real opportunity right now. If he can't get to the job sites, he loses the contract, and then we're back to square one. She wrapped both hands around her mug. "You have good credit. It costs you nothing to let him use it." I want you to understand that sentence. It costs you nothing. From my mother, who has a master's degree, who is a smart woman, who knows, if she thinks about it for 30 seconds, that credit is not a renewable resource that replenishes when you're done borrowing it, that a co-signature creates a legal obligation with no expiration date. That "it costs you nothing" is something you say about letting someone borrow a pen, not about attaching your financial identity to someone with a history of default. She knew all of this. She just hoped I wouldn't say it out loud. "It costs me my credit score if he misses a payment," I said. "It costs me my mortgage application. It costs me potential employment if a future employer runs a credit check." And given Derek's payment history, the probability of him missing a payment is not small. She looked at me for a long moment. Then she said, "That's a very cold way to talk about your brother." There it is. That's always where it lands. When the financial argument doesn't work, it becomes a character argument. I am cold. I am selfish. I am the kind of person who runs probability calculations on her brother instead of just loving him. I said, "I've wired him $31,000 in 3 years. That's in text from you, with dates and amounts. That's documented. Is that cold?" She set her mug down. "Quiet now. I'm not doing the cosign," I said. "And I need you to know that this is not a negotiation." She left without finishing her coffee. Derek called that afternoon. He didn't start with an apology. He started with, "I heard you have some kind of issue with this." Some kind of issue. I said, "I don't have an issue. I have a position. I'm not co-signing." "Claire." He did this thing with my name, made it sound like a gentle correction, like I was a kid who'd made an understandable mistake. "You know how this looks, right? Dad made this a whole thing in front of everyone. If you back out now." "Dad made it a whole thing without asking me first." Pause. "He thought you'd say yes. He was wrong." Another pause, longer. Then the shift, his voice went lower, more personal. "I really need this. This isn't like the other times. I have a real contract lined up. I just need to be able to get there, and I can't get there without a vehicle, and I can't get a vehicle without the cosign. You're literally the only person who can help me right now." I had heard some version of this sentence for 3 years. You're the only one. Just this once. This time is different. I had believed it each time because wanting to believe someone is capable of change is not stupidity, it is love. The problem is that love without accountability is not kindness, it is just permission. "I hope the contract works out," I said. "I genuinely do. But I'm not co-signing." I hung up. The call from my father came the next morning. He didn't open with small talk. He said, "I want you to explain to me what you think you're doing." I said I thought I was making a financial decision about my own credit. He said, "I made a commitment in front of the whole family." "You made a commitment on my behalf without asking me." Silence. "That's not how this works, Claire. You don't just." He stopped. Started again. "You have the means to help your brother. The fact that you're choosing not to is something I will not forget." I want to describe what that sentence did to me, not what it felt like in the moment. In the moment, I felt very calm, almost like a hum of steadiness in my chest, but what it did underneath, in the place where I had been quietly accommodating this family for years, it was like something clicked off, a light that had been on so long I'd stopped noticing it. He would not forget. As if my cooperation had always been owed. As if $31,000 and years of yes was a baseline, not a gift. And deviation from that baseline was a betrayal rather than a boundary. "I understand," I said. "Do you?" "I do. And I want you to understand something too. I won't be contributing financially to Derek's situation going forward. Not the cosign, not transfers, not any of it. I love him. I'm not his bank." I heard my father exhale. "Then don't expect to be treated like family." I said goodbye and ended the call. That was the sentence that took me a while to process. Not because it was surprising. Somewhere underneath, I think I had known it was always the implicit contract, but because hearing it out loud, plainly, with no softening, was different than knowing it abstractly. They had never loved me unconditionally. They had loved me in exchange for my usefulness. The warmth, the praise, the pride in my success. It had always been partly gratitude that I was the kind of daughter who came through, who didn't make things difficult, who wired the money. I sat with that for a long time. Not with anger. With grief, mostly, and then with something that was almost relief. Because when you finally understand the real terms of something, you can make an actual decision about whether you agree to them. I did not agree to them. The following week, I met with my lawyer and we formalized everything she'd outlined. A letter going to Derek directly, via certified mail, stating that I would not be entering into any co-signing arrangement and had not authorized any representation that I would. A formal freeze on my credit with all three bureaus, not a lock, a freeze, meaning no new credit inquiry could be run on my name without my explicit unfreeze and approval. If anyone tried to put my name on a loan application without my direct involvement, it would bounce immediately. I also contacted the two accounts where my name appeared as an emergency contact or secondary, old things from years ago when my mother had listed me for various family financial arrangements, and removed myself. Then I sent my family one email. Not emotional. Not long. 3 short paragraphs. The first said I was not co-signing and that decision was final. The second said I would not be providing financial support to Derek going forward in any form, and listed, briefly, the total amount transferred over the past 3 years. The third said I hoped we could maintain a relationship, but that any future relationship would need to be built on terms that didn't include financial obligation flowing one direction indefinitely. I sent it on a Tuesday evening, and then I closed my laptop and watched 2 episodes of a show I'd been meaning to get to for months and went to bed at 10 o'clock. The fallout was not quiet. My mother called 7 times between Wednesday morning and Thursday afternoon. I let them all go to voicemail. The messages escalated in a pattern I had watched her use my whole life. Concern, then reason, then guilt, then something sharper. The last one said I was destroying this family over money and that she didn't raise me to be like this. My aunt texted to say she had heard what was happening and she hoped I would reconsider. 2 cousins I had not spoken to in over a year somehow had opinions. Derek sent one message. Just, so that's it? I did not respond to any of them. The silence, I think, was the part they found most disorienting. In the past, when I had shown any hesitation, I had always eventually come around. There was always a conversation that wore me down, always a moment where the weight of disappointing them became heavier than the cost of agreeing. They were waiting for that moment. They did not understand that the moment was not coming. About 2 weeks after the email, something shifted. Derek's car situation resolved itself, but not the way my parents had planned. He found a co-signer, a friend, apparently, someone willing to do it. I heard about this through my aunt, who was still loosely updating me despite everything. The car deal went through. Derek got the vehicle. He got the contract too, for a while, for about 6 weeks. Then the contract fell through. And then, because this is Derek, the car payments became irregular. And then the friend who co-signed started getting calls. I heard all of this secondhand, pieces of it, over the following months. I didn't seek the information out, it arrived on its own through the family ambient signal, a cousin here, my aunt there, a detail dropped in an otherwise unrelated message. I did not say, I told you so. Not to anyone, not even to myself. Because this was not about being right, it was never about being right, it was about the fact that I was not the solution to my brother's problems. I had never been. I had just been the most available buffer between him and the consequences of his own choices, and as long as I was there, absorbing the impact, he had no reason to change. And my parents had no reason to examine what they had built. 3 months after the birthday dinner, I submitted my mortgage application. The process took about 6 weeks. I got the call on a Friday afternoon, sitting at my kitchen table with my second cup of coffee going cold. Pre-approved. The rate was good. Not perfect, but good, well within the range I had modeled out. The house I had been looking at in a neighborhood 12 minutes from my office. The one with the small backyard and the original hardwood floors and the kitchen that needed exactly the amount of work I had the bandwidth to do. That house was within reach. I sat there for a while after the call. Just sat there. I thought about what it had cost me to get here. Not the money. I knew that figure exactly, down to the month. Down to the interest rate I could have earned. I thought about what it had cost in years. In the version of this where I had kept saying, yes, I would not be here right now. I would have made $31,000 less progress. My credit might have taken hits I hadn't anticipated. My savings timeline would have shifted. The house would have been another year away, maybe 2. More than the money, though. I thought about what it had cost me to understand my family clearly. That's the part no one talks about when they tell these stories. They talk about the money. They talk about the boundary. They talk about the empowerment of finally saying no. What they don't talk about is the grief. The specific grief of realizing that the love you thought was unconditional had terms you never agreed to. That the people who were supposed to be your safest people had, for years, been treating your stability as something they were entitled to draw from, and that you would let them because the alternative, seeing it clearly, was too painful to sit with. I had sat with it now, for months. Alone, mostly in my apartment, in the car, in the quiet after work when the day winds down and you're just a person with your own thoughts. I had let myself be sad about it. Really sad. Not dramatic, not performative. Just genuinely sad in the private way that grief actually works. And then, gradually, something else moved in alongside the sadness. It felt like space. Like a room I'd been using for storage that had finally cleaned out, and now I was standing in it wondering what I actually wanted to put there. My mother and I talked for the first time in about 10 weeks. She called on a Sunday. I answered. We talked for almost an hour, carefully, both of us aware of where the edges were. She did not apologize for the birthday dinner. I did not expect her to, but she did say, at one point, I know you've done a lot for this family. And then she moved on to other things, asking about work, about the apartment, and I let her. It is not a repaired relationship, it is a different relationship. One where the terms are visible now, on both sides, and where I have a much clearer understanding of what I will and won't carry. That is not nothing. It might even be better than what we had before, which was warmth built on an arrangement I had never actually consented to. Derek and I have not spoken since the "so that's it" text. I don't know when that will change, or if it will. I hold that question gently. I don't need to resolve it yet. What I know is this. On a Saturday in April, I signed the papers for a house. My house, 3 bedrooms, original hardwood floors, a backyard with one very large oak tree and room for a garden if I ever decide I want one. I signed my name at the bottom of documents that were entirely, cleanly mine. No one else's name on them, no one else's financial situation entangled with them, no one who could stop paying and send it sideways. The realtor handed me the keys and asked if I wanted to do anything to celebrate. I drove to the house alone, unlocked the front door, stood in the empty living room with the afternoon light coming through the windows the way it does in houses that have good bones and high ceilings, and I just stood there. The quiet was complete. I had spent so long being the one who held things together for other people that I had almost forgotten what it felt like to build something that was only mine. To be responsible for a thing and have that responsibility be to myself, not to someone else's instability. I did not pour champagne. I did not make a toast. I stood in the empty room and I breathed. And I thought about all the years of yes that had made this harder and longer than it needed to be. And I thought about the birthday dinner. And my father's voice saying family takes care of family like it was a law of physics instead of a choice being made in one direction only. And then I stopped thinking about all of it, because the light was very good, and the floors were beautiful, and this was my house, and what I wanted to do in it, right now, in this moment, was nothing at all except be here. So that's what I did. There's a thing people say when you set a limit with your family, they say it gets easier. I'm not sure that's exactly right. It doesn't get easier so much as it gets quieter. The noise, the guilt, the pressure, the low-frequency hum of their disappointment gradually moves further away. Not because you stop caring about them, you don't stop, but because you stop organizing your decisions around their reaction to your decisions, and once you stop doing that, you realize how much of your energy it was using. I still think about Derek sometimes. Not with anger. With something more like the feeling you get when you watch someone make a choice you've watched them make before, knowing how it ends, not being able to stop it. He will find another cosigner. He will find another buffer. Or he won't, and he will finally have to meet a consequence head on. And maybe that will be the thing that shifts something. I don't know. I genuinely don't know which outcome is better for him in the long run. I'm not sure anyone does. What I know is that I am not the answer to that question. I never was. My father has called me twice since the mortgage closed. Both times it was logistical. One time about a family gathering. Once about something with my grandmother's health that he wanted to loop me in on. We talked. It was careful and functional. And somewhere underneath it, I think there is still something real. I am not sure yet what we are building or if we are building anything. But I am not closed to the possibility. What I am closed to is the old arrangement. The one where my success was a shared account and my stability was an asset anyone could draw from without asking, and my no was just the beginning of a longer negotiation that always ended in yes. That is over, not because I stopped loving them, because I finally started treating my own life as something that belonged to me. In my house now, there is very little furniture. A bed, a couch I've had for 6 years, a kitchen table, just mine, with 2 chairs because that felt right. Enough for company, not so many that it felt like I was waiting for people to fill the space. Some evenings I sit at that table with coffee and I can hear the oak tree outside moving in the wind. It is a small sound, easy to miss if you're not paying attention, but when the room is quiet enough, it is the only sound there is. And it is enough. I've thought a lot about why it took me so long, not the cosign. That decision was easy once I allowed myself to make it. I mean the years before that, the $31,000, the wires sent at 11 at night, the times I told myself it was love when, if I'm being honest, it was closer to fear. Fear of what they'd think of me. Fear of being the one who broke the family. Fear of being called selfish by people whose approval I had been quietly organizing my life around since I was a child. What I understand now is that fear and love can wear the same face for a very long time, and the only way to tell them apart is to ask yourself whether the thing you're doing is making the other person stronger or just making yourself more comfortable in the short term. Every transfer I sent Derek didn't help him. It helped me avoid the discomfort of watching him fail. That's not the same thing. That's not even close to the same thing. There's a version of cause and effect that people talk about like it's punishment. You do the wrong thing, something bad happens to you, the universe corrects. I don't think it works like that. I think it's quieter, more like gravity. When you consistently remove every consequence from someone's path, they don't learn to walk differently. They just keep walking the same way. Derek had been walking the same way for a decade. Not because he was a bad person, because every time the ground started to drop out, someone caught him, usually me, and when I stopped, the ground dropped out and he had to figure out what to do about that. That's not cruelty. That's just how things actually work when no one is interfering with them. The harder part, the part that took me longer to sit with, was what it meant about my parents. Because for a long time I had told myself that they were just trying to protect Derek, that their instinct was love, even if their method was wrong. And that's probably true. But good intentions don't change outcomes. You can love someone genuinely and still teach them, over 30 years, that they do not have to be responsible for themselves. You can love someone and still use the people around them as instruments of that love without asking permission. My parents did both of those things, not out of malice, out of habit and out of the particular kind of blindness that comes from never having anyone push back. I was the first person who pushed back, clearly, irrevocably. That is not something I take pride in. It's not a victory. It's just what finally happened when I decided that my own life was worth building without compromise. What I would say to anyone who sees themselves in this story is not a tidy lesson. It's more like an observation. The people who drain you are not always villains. Sometimes they are people you love, who love you, who have simply never been asked to stop, and asking them to stop, really asking, with your actions, not just your words, is one of the harder things you will ever do. Not because they will make it hard, though they will, but because you will have to face the version of yourself that kept saying yes and understand why and decide to be someone different going forward. That takes more than courage. It takes the kind of honesty that is uncomfortable even when no one else is watching. It takes looking at a number, $31,000 in my case, and not flinching away from what it means. It takes being willing to be misunderstood by people you care about, for as long as it takes. My house is quiet in the mornings. I make coffee and I sit at my kitchen table and I look at the oak tree in the backyard and I think about none of this. That is the part I didn't expect. That once you stop carrying something that was never yours to carry, you don't spend a lot of time thinking about it. You just live, normally, in your own life. That, more than anything, is what I was looking for.